Welcome back to another awesome video. Today we're looking at the 8-track stereo recorder.
Yes, this is an early 1970s Panasonic system with an 8-track player. A lot of people might look at this and think, well, what's so special about this? But stick around because the 8-track player actually has a feature that is not very common. But before we talk about this, we need to talk about Elvis. That's right, Elvis, the king of rock and roll.
The Hound Dog.
Yes, Elvis was king of rock and roll long before I was born. Anyway, a big event in Elvis's history was the 1973 Aloha from Hawaii concert via satellite. Elvis had a lot of connections to Hawaii. He helped build that Arizona Memorial, which you learn if you go visit. He made a couple movies. And in 1973, they did this concert.
Speaking of Elvis, there's a new movie coming out about him.
That's true. That's what sort of prompted me to do this. But anyway, I've never been able to play this cartridge properly. Why is that? Because it's a quad cartridge. If you look at this 8-track, you may notice a little notch in the upper corner that it does not exist in a standard 8-track. That tells this player, a quadraphonic player, that it's a quadraphonic cartridge. Quadraphonic 8-track only has 2 programs instead of the usual 4 because you've actually got 4 channels. You've got front left, front right, rear left, and rear right. So quadraphonic was going to be the next big thing in sound back in the early 70s. We all know it eventually went the way of pet rocks and bell bottoms. I can't help but draw a parallel to sort of our surround systems of today. If you're willing to put a little bit of extra effort in, you can get surround sound. And you could do that back in the 70s. There was no video component. It was just audio back then. So from a technical perspective, quadraphonic on tape was a lot easier than quadraphonic on a record. With the record, you had grooves and decoding and stuff, whereas a tape, you're just reusing the existing tracks on a tape. This Elvis concert was actually the centerpiece of RCA's quadraphonic technology, with it being the launch of their quadradisc format and the 8-track initially only being released as quad and then later stereo. So what I'd like to do, since I just acquired this quad player, is to play it as it was intended, see if I like the see if I like the quadraphonic sound, and then if possible digitize it to an AC3 file and play it back on some more modern equipment. Quadraphonic players are more rare than standard players, and I was lucky to pick this one up for about $35. A lot of these quad players are far more expensive. This is a very unusual looking player with the sort of slanted control panel, looks kind of space age, definitely 70s.
70s.
Yeah. Of course, the main feature is the quadraphonic 8-track, which simply lights up a 4-channel indicator and goes between tracks 1 and 2 instead of tracks 1, 2, 3, and 4. Before we get into the music and digitization, let's take a quick tour of the control panel. On the left side of the device, you've got buttons for power and eject and some microphone jacks, and 4 toggle switches. The first toggle switch lets you choose between continuous play and Pana-Ject. Yes, that's right, Pana-Ject. Panasonic decided their eject mechanism was so special they had to name it after themselves. And actually, it kind of is. Most 8-tracks are hand inserted and hand removed, and the ones that auto eject are sometimes kind of sluggish, but this one ejects the tape almost as quickly as a cassette deck. Too bad it doesn't turn the system off when it's done though. Moving along to the remaining toggle switches, you've got AFC, which is automatic frequency control for helping you tune in those stations easier. Then you've got monitor and speaker control.
Business owner, your bottom line is always
the high-low off just turns the speakers on and off, and I used it on off when I was doing my line output recording. I couldn't tell the difference between high and low in playback, but when I was recording, it made a difference in the sensitivity of the VU meters, and it was weird because the volume control then also doubles as a record level control. Not sure how this is really supposed to work. Anyway, moving right along, the next toggle was the speaker switch, which lets you choose between using the front speakers, the rear speakers, or all of them. That's independently of another switch, which is going to determine whether it's stereo or quad. But this just basically turns the speakers on and off. Beside the toggles are the 4 individual volume controls, helpfully labeled front or rear on the switches themselves and left or right on the panel. And it's interesting that the front ones are grouped together in the middle and the rear ones on the outside. I generally don't like individual volumes. I'd rather have a volume and a balance control, but I could see why they need this with quadraphonic and 4 speakers and Some of the nicer receivers would even have like a joystick to get the balance between the speakers just right. To the right of the volume controls, you have separate bass and treble controls. There's no loudness or individual adjustments for each speaker. When you turn those, they may feel a little stiff. That's because inside you're actually turning 4 big attached potentiometers for every channel. Next up, you've got the selector knob, which is your most important setting related to quadraphonic. Stereo, of course, is stereo. 4-channel is the direct 4-channel, and Qplex or Quadraplex is Panasonic's simulated 4-channel, and it does add some sort of echoey effect. So if you just want something coming out of the rear speakers, you could have simulated quadraphonic or stereo from FM broadcasts. So rounding out the control panel, we've of course got the input selector and vertical tuning knob. Inputs, by the way, it's got line in 4-channel and phonograph 2-channel and an MPX FM output for use of a broadcast decoder. So I assume that would have to be amplified elsewhere. And also if you had a quad phono, it would have to probably come in through the line in because you'd need a decoder. Anyway, let's get on with the musical experiment. Let me be clear that I needed 2 computers. So you see one computer here, I have another one recording off camera simultaneously the front and rear channels. Why do I need 2 computers? Because analog tape will never play back at the same speed consistently, but the computers will. So I took the line outs, recorded them, the front to one computer, the back to the other. Then I was able to merge those using Audacity and create a single AC3 file, and that AC3 file was then recognized by my modern stereo receiver as Dolby Digital, where it routed the 4 channels to the appropriate speakers. And I also, just on 1 or 2 songs, was able to capture the video of the performance, edit it to a copy of my audio, and then using FFmpeg replace it so I could actually experience the live concert with quadraphonic sound. So this is the first time I'd ever heard quadraphonic. It definitely felt more spacious. Certain instruments and vocalists definitely seemed to be coming from, the rear versus the front. There's definitely diagonal panning going on. It was sometimes a subtle effect, sometimes not. What did you think of the quadraphonic stuff?
You could hear like small clapping noises like you normally hear on a tape or a normal 8-track.
Yeah, well, it definitely there was something to it. It wasn't as good as our modern surround sound, and the fidelity of the 8-track was really low. But still pretty good for something that's, 50 years old and still working. I could definitely tell what they were trying to accomplish. I guess of all the songs, probably Suspicious Minds seemed to have the most surround effect to it. And I'm sure this concert has been released digitally or remastered. I didn't even check, but it was a fun little experiment. And you'll notice, unlike the other videos on our channel, there was no repair section in this video. That's because the only thing wrong with this was a long piece of tape that somebody had, I guess, jammed their cartridge in there. I just had to unwind that, clean off the heads. Everything was good. Even the belt was good. The flywheel was nice. Pretty well-constructed mechanism, and still working after 50 years. Looking around the inside, one little thing of note, looks like there was something hidden behind the back panel. We see a hole in the left labeled record, playback, probably for a DIN connector, and another hole on the right, probably for something related to power. But those are covered up by the cardboard or whatever back panel.
See you next time for another awesome video.
Bye.